I'm quite confident that this will be managed very effectively.
So why hasn't it already, though, to be blunt, Minister? Why are the numbers continuing to increase at a record pace if, in fact, as you contend, it is being managed?
Well, it is being managed, and this is a global challenge, Vashi.
Excuse me? Dominic LeBlanc spoke about Canada's readiness for a possible surge of people from the United States. If you can believe it, he said they were ready, but that he asked to know if we were ready, asked to know what we needed to be ready because we may not be ready, but not to worry because we were ready, and then said that things were improving because we were already ready, even though we're not ready.
Let's take a look.
Let's start tonight with something Trump's new border czar is saying in a local TV interview in the United States. Tom Homan is singling out Canada, saying he plans to deal with what he calls an extreme national security vulnerability along our shared border. Have a listen.
In my 34 years, a lot of SIAs, special interest aliens, from countries that sponsor terror or are known not to be our friends, come through the northern border because they're an organization that have a lot of money and they can afford to fly into Canada to come across that northern border because they know a lot less fewer officers up here. And Thousand Islands, you can cross St. Lawrence River in 45 seconds. So it's an extreme national security vulnerability on the northern border, and it's one of the things I'll tackle.
Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc oversees Canada's border. He's also the vice chair of this federal government's new U.S. Relations Committee. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi.
Is our border with the U.S., the Americans' northern border, as Donald Trump's new border czar has just described it, a, quote, huge national security issue?
I don't think so. I think we work successfully with the Americans over decades to manage this large, long undefended border. I'm briefed regularly, and as recently as this morning, by the Commissioner of the RCMP, Border Services, CSIS, on some of the preparations that are always undertaken at the border. I have a lot of confidence in their work, and they do it with their American partners, but we'll work very constructively with the incoming administration, as we always have. I'm confident that this can be managed very successfully.
Okay. So, if you believe Dominic LeBlanc, everything's tickety-boo. No problems here. Everything's been going well. We've been managing well with the United States. Awesome. Nothing to see here.
But we don't believe him, do we?
Let's keep going.
Mr. Haman points in his interview that he gave, where that quote is derived from, to the issue of human smuggling through Canada into the U.S. And there is some data that objectively supports the idea that there is an issue. And that data shows basically that more than 19,000 people in the so-called Swanton sector area, basically the border at Vermont, New York, and northern New Hampshire, in a 12-month span, ending October 2nd, that's how many people crossed. That's more than were apprehended through the same area over the previous 17 years combined.
Whoa, those are huge numbers.
And now you know why he didn't, start bad-mouthing the Harper administration when it came to the border.
Because it sounds like the Harper administration was doing much, much better.
Right.
And the Chrétien administration.
Yeah. and he said, well, we weave. That's what the Liberals do. They always take credit for things that they don't do, but then they blame everybody else when something bad happens.
Right. They take credit for the good stuff that happened under Harper, and then they blame Harper for the bad stuff that's happening right now.
Anyway, so apparently everything isn't so tickety-boo, LeBlanc. So, yeah, 19,000 people in 1 year versus 19,000 people in 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is your government doing to address that?
So, and you're right to identify, Vashi, a challenge that we've been working on for many months now. The reimposition, for example, of visas on flights on persons arriving directly from Mexico. is a big deal. My colleague, the Minister of Immigration, made some changes, around visas for people coming, for example, from India. Much of this traffic is persons that come to Canada and then make their way to the border. So we're in the process of tightening up and have tightened up. Those numbers have come down, but we're going to continue to do the work that we need to do. Immigration Canada and Border Services are very much involved in that, and so are the RCMP.
Okay, so first, everything was great. Everything was fine. Then it's, oh, well, yeah, you're right to identify that challenge. Yeah, we've been working on that, but things are getting better. Okay, so they've known about it, and they've already talked about it, and now they're tightening it up. Okay.
A little bit more specific when you say those numbers have come down, because again, Mr. Hammond was specifically pointing to that issue, saying that over the year, there has been a big increase. I take your point on the visa requirement for Mexico, and that it did make a discernible difference when it came to Mexicans who were trying to move into the U.S. But what happened is that India, in particular, basically supplanted that, and so the increase kept going.
Oops. So
these visa measures worked for Mexico, but didn't for India, is what I'm understanding.
basically, yeah. And that independent of the people from Mexico coming to Canada just to go back down into the States, there's a whole slew of people coming in from India that are just landing in Canada and then going into the States, and they're not having any problems doing that. That's what I'm getting from this. And
Well, that sounds like it's going to upset our American neighbors to the south.
no doubt. And as Vashi said, the problem has been steadily increasing over the years. So, LeBlanc, what are you talking about? Oh, well, things are improving. Yeah, improving in the wrong way.
Is that really an improvement then?
It's a negative improvement. Depends on how you
Is that
measure
what
it.
we're calling failure now? Negative improvement?
Right? Negative success.
Are things really improving? Because I don't see any data to support that position.
Yeah, I think they are. And Mark Miller updated our Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. relations again today in terms of some of the visa measures that his department has taken with respect to persons coming from India. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we have done a lot of work, but we'll continue to do, Vashi, what's necessary to bring these numbers down. One of the great things about the Canada-U.S. relationship is its resiliency. It's been that way for decades. It's one of the closest partnerships that two countries can have. But we totally understand Canadians' determination to ensure that the border continues to be secure. Canada absolutely wants to be in a position to decide who comes into our country. And the United States obviously has exactly the same objective. So we'll work with them in partnership because it is a north-south circumstance. But I'm very confident. The president of the Border Services Agency today told me about conversations she's having with the leaders of the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. I'm quite confident that this will be managed very effectively.
So why hasn't it already, though, to be blunt, Minister? Why are the numbers continuing to increase at a record pace if, in fact, as you contend, it is being managed?
Great question.
I'll take that it's not being managed for 300, Alex.
Well, and I think that the Liberals are scared now with President-elect Trump being elected down in the States because he's not going to tolerate this crap from Canada anymore. He's not going to tolerate this crap from the Liberals anymore. When Biden was in charge, I don't think he cared nearly as much about what was happening with the border. Same as here, right? It was nearly an open border policy. And now that Trump's coming in, I think the Liberals are scared that they're actually going to have to do something about this.
Right? And it's, all of a sudden they're going to start paying attention. But here's the thing. You can't blame it on Harper. You can't blame it on even Chrétien and Martin.
Oh, they'll try.
Well, good luck with that.
Well, it is being managed, and this is a global challenge, Vashi.
Excuse me?
Wait, are we talking about inflation now, or are we talking about immigration?
No, we're talking about immigration from Canada into the U.S., and apparently it's a global problem.
I swear we're talking about inflation because this is what they keep saying. Well, it's a global problem.
That's what they say about anything and everything that has gone wrong under the Liberal watch.
And like, wow, folks. Wow. So it's not our fault that we're not managing our own immigration properly. It's everybody else's fault. Got it. Like, come on.
Zero accountability with this government.
But it was obvious before, but he just laid bare the Liberal talking point playbook for all to see. When in doubt, say it's a global challenge. And then it's not our fault anymore. Like, nobody believes you.
The United States is facing similar challenges also, but we totally accept our responsibility in terms of ensuring that the visa requirements, the immigration rules are in place, that people who come to Canada lawfully, we expect people to come to Canada through regular pathways to follow the law. There are many ways for them to come to Canada, but trying to submit a visa application when your intention is to try and illegally cross into the United States is obviously not an acceptable circumstance. So the Immigration Department has a number of ways to bring that down. And CBSA and the RCMP are patrolling. I went with the RCMP late this summer to see in the eastern townships of Quebec a number of installations they have in place to catch exactly this context of human smuggling. The commissioner of the RCMP tells me that he's going to be ramping up and reaffecting different resources as the needs arise. I'm confident that Mike Duhem will be in a position between regular border crossings to ensure the RCMP do the job that Canadians expect them to do. And if they need more resources, we're going to give them more resources.
But I thought everything was fine.
I thought they were ready.
I thought everything was improving. But now you don't know if they need more resources. But you said that they have a bunch of installations to catch all these people. But 19,000 are making it through, and that number is going up.
Well, you did the math on this, didn't you?
Yeah. So, weird coincidence, folks. So, 19,000 people in the last year had basically made it across the border in this area. And coincidentally, there are 19,000 police officers that work for the RCMP across Canada. Now, the border from basically Vancouver over to the East Coast is 5,060 kilometers long. If you took every single RCMP officer and put them across that border, you would have one RCMP officer roughly every 300 meters.
So they could pretty much wave to each other. They could see each other.
Yeah.
But that's leaving no officers throughout
Right.
the rest of the country.
There's nobody left to investigate the SDTC scandal. There's nobody left to patrol up in the Northwest Territories and actually do all the police work that is needed up there, and the Yukon and Manitoba and all of the other provinces. So, yeah. As I said on our show with True North earlier today, unless there's been a mass hiring spree in the last 2 weeks, which I'm pretty sure there hasn't, you don't have enough people. And just so everybody knows, the Canada Border Services Agency pretty much focuses on the border crossings, not the parts of the border where there are no official border crossings. That's technically the RCMP's jurisdiction.
Yeah, so you're going to see them at bridges like in Niagara or Windsor.
Right.
But you're not going to see them in, the wilderness along the, is it called the no-touch zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And they have a very specific and focused job, and they're trained and they're supposed to do it well. But the issue isn't with those designated border crossings, because if you have a bunch of people that want to cross the border that don't want to be caught crossing the border, they're not going to go to the place where they're going to be caught crossing the border, are they? They're going to be going to places where it's not controlled.
Right, they're not going to be crossing at the Rainbow Bridge. They're going to be crossing somewhere in the wilderness.
Like the St. Lawrence River and the Thousand Islands. Pop, you go right across the river and off you go across to the United States. That's where the concern is.
I want to push you on that, because I want to be clear that those resources are available, because here's what the Quebec head of the RCMP has said very recently about that border and what's happening when it pertains to human smuggling. They intercept an average of more than 100 people per week on the Canadian side of the border. And Mr. Poirier said that's only a portion of those headed to the U.S. Surely 19,000 people a year to you is not acceptable. And further to the patrol of that area, what about the CBSA? They say they're 2,000 people short along the border to do the job that is expected of them.
Well, again, that's the union representing CBSA employees that said that. That's not the position of the senior executives that run the CBSA.
The position of the senior executives that run the CBSA also seemed to think that ArriveCan was just fine, and there was no problem spending $60 million on an $80,000 an app.
Right, so you'll have to excuse us if we don't trust their judgment.
The CBSA has very effective controls at recognized border crossings. The RCMP are responsible, as you know, Vashi, between the 136, I think, recognized or standing border crossings from one end of the country to the other. But I've said to Commissioner Duhem in a meeting today that I expected by the end of this week, early next week, that he would do an inventory of any additional resources he needs. Is it technology, equipment, to show Canadians that we're doing the job that they expect us to do. I think we should have a lot of confidence that they'll do that job effectively, but they'll do it in partnership with the American authorities, Vashi.
Okay, so now you don't know if you're ready. You can't make this stuff up, folks.
No, I think he's just running his mouth to try to sound good, to try to make the Liberal government sound good. And I think Canadians can see through it.
Yeah, I hope Mike Duhem is watching this being like, oh, I guess that's new. Okay, I guess I have to get an inventory to Mr. LeBlanc, because he said that he asked me to do that for him on CTV. I guess I better start doing that, because he never asked me that before today. So this is the thing. So first they were ready, then they weren't ready because things weren't going well, but then things were improving, and then we found out things weren't improving. And now we find out we don't even know if we're ready, so he's asked a report to find out if we're ready.
I thought they told us that they were ready.
Already.
But again, with all due respect, Minister, if that job was being done effectively, would 19,000 people be crossing illegally into the U.S. and arrested on that side of the border a year? Like, why aren't you looking at those resources 6 months ago and saying, let's add more now? You had to know this possibility, this hard line taken by Donald Trump was a potential, at least.
Totally. And that preparation, as you properly noted, has been ongoing for many months. So some of the...
And why aren't the numbers going down, respectfully?
They will.
Once we know if we're ready or not.
Well, a thought occurs while they were bantering back and forth. Vashi had said it was 19,000 people that were crossing the border and then getting arrested.
Yep.
Does that mean even more are going undetected?
Probably. 100%. And that's why it's a big issue.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, not everybody is friendly, right? Some people want to cross into Canada or the United States for nefarious reasons.
Well, but even if it's not, right? The problem is you have people crossing into the country illegally. So they're illegally landed aliens. Like, that's what they're classified as. So, and then they go into the country and start taking jobs, and they're not paying taxes because, you know,
they're undocumented.
Right. So, and then they just settle in. Now, there's people that will have a perspective here of having a certain level of sympathy for them. That's fine. But the issue is you have people that have waited years to come into a country, following the process, paying money in order to actually come through the process legally to actually get into the country. And then you have other people that are just skipping the line for whatever reason, nefarious or not. And this is the issue, right? This is the issue. So this is, like, I don't blame the Americans. Like, our northern border has been a sieve.
Well, I was describing in the Northern Dispatch video that we did on Thursday that When I was a child, I lived in a border city, Niagara Falls, and we would go to the grocery store in the States every single week. And it was just as simple as my parents pulling up to the CBSA booth and saying, yes, we're Canadian. There's 5 of us in the car. The kids are Canadian too. Yes, there are kids. Off we go. We had a very good, trusting relationship with the United States that they didn't even bother to check your driver's license. And now I don't think they trust us.
Well, and that's also when our immigration system was very different as well. It was much more stringent. It was much tougher to get in. But
And
now,
there were fewer people getting into the country.
Right.
I mean, back when Harper was, he first came into office, it was much, much less than it is now.
well, and again, you have the Biden administration and then the Trudeau government, both ideologically aligned, and they seem to think it's racist to question anybody who comes into any country.
Well, when you are 2 very large countries, landmass, not necessarily population, but in terms of landmass, Canada and the United States, and you've got a border that's over 5,000 kilometers long, and a lot of that is through the wilderness, and a lot of that is unmanned because, again, how are you going to do that? You're going to take all the RCMP and put them, 300 meters apart from each other along the whole border? You can't do that. You have to know that the other country is doing their part. And to me, it sounds like Canada's not doing its part.
Well, and this is the thing. It's a great point because you can't realistically man that border. What you can do is make sure that your customs and immigration system is extremely tight at your ports and at your airports. Those are the ways that people are getting in order to actually migrate either north or south. So that's where you need most of your controls. And again, at one point, that was nice and tight, and it was very difficult to actually go anywhere. Now, it's a lot different.
They will come down. The changes to the Safe Third Country Agreement were also, we think, very important. People who enter Canada illegally will be turned around and returned to the United States. That's exactly what a Safe Third Country Agreement does. The United States government, including President Trump in his first term in office, were very much in favor of amending the Safe Third Country Agreement to deal with these irregular crossings. So the conversations that I've had with American authorities, and that I know that senior law enforcement and national security agencies are having with their American counterparts, is how to make that operationally the most effective possible. They're turning around a lot of people.
So let me ask you then, looking ahead a little bit, because the human smuggling is one issue, the north to south is one issue, the potential for south to north is another. And I listened to your scrum last week in which you were asked, because of Trump's promise to enact the greatest deportation, the largest scale deportation, as he calls it, ever in the history of the United States on day one, like the potential for south to north. And you were saying at the time that you're not worried about a massive rush to the border. I wanted to know specifically from you what your message is to people who are deported from the United States, because it was back in 2017 with the so-called Muslim travel ban when the Prime Minister very specifically tweeted out a message of welcome to people who were seeking refuge from persecution. He got a lot of flack for that. There was a lot of criticism about the potential tie between that and the number of people seeking refuge through irregular points of entry into Canada. What is your message tonight to people who may be caught up in that deportation?
So I said last week, and I still believe it's true, that the RCMP and Border Services Agency have contingency plans in place that will deal with any one of these eventualities. They're refining those plans as they get intelligence, including from American partners. So that work is ongoing, but has been ongoing for many months. I think my colleague Mark Miller said it very well earlier this week. Not everyone is welcome to come to Canada in an irregular pathway. There are many lawful, regular ways for people to visit Canada or to come to Canada. If you come to Canada outside one of those lawful pathways, you will be turned around and sent back to the United States. You'll be apprehended and sent to the United States. Everybody who arrives at a border crossing or is apprehended, there'll be biometric screening done. If there are any concerns around criminality or any of those issues, those people will be detained and they'll be deported. So I'm quite confident that we have the regulatory and lawful framework in place, and we have the RCMP and the Border Services Agency that do this work every day now. But as you noted, if in some circumstance there's a surge that takes place, they will have the resources to manage that surge.
Okay. Well, it's great that Dominic LeBlanc has ascertained that every single one of these people coming north are going to choose to go through a regular border crossing.
Right,
That's
because
so
the
convenient.
Safe Third Country Act only applies at regular border crossings, you know, where there are CBSA agents, like the Rainbow Bridge.
And, you know, Roxham Road. where
Well,
that was
Roxham
happening.
Road wasn't a regular one, but they have since amended it. What had happened was, I think it was in 2017, Trudeau had put out this tweet that, oh, you know, Canada's accepting of all people if you're being persecuted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so people were starting to come to Canada and claiming refugee status. What they were doing is they were landing in the United States, because at that time it was easier to land in the US and then cross the border north and go into Canada, and claiming refugee status. Many of these people were not being persecuted. They were playing this loophole, and Trudeau had invited them. So I think what happened was that way too many people were taking advantage, and it was more than our systems could handle.
Well,
so Trudeau invited this, not thinking of what might happen, that, you know, we only have a certain capacity for so many migrants, and instead all hell broke loose, essentially.
Well, and I love that Dominic LeBlanc says, oh, well, you know, we're just going to stop these people and turn them around and then deport them, and they'll go back to the United States. What do you think the United States is going to, like, what, these people are just going to camp out between the two border crossings?
But not only that, our prime minister was telling people to come to Canada because of our lax immigration. And then it completely backfired on everybody. Like, Trudeau and the Liberals have made such a mess of this country because of their open border policies. It's beyond unmanageable now. And again, I think they're scared now that President-elect Trump is coming in, and he's not going to tolerate it anymore.